She spilled wine on a billionaire, then watched him go pale at the sight of her face. He whispered one word under his breath, "Anna." But she's never heard that name before. Now, a forgotten fire, a missing girl, and a billionaire's buried past are about to shatter everything she thought she knew. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The rooftop restaurant shimmered under golden lights, the hum of jazz mingling with clinking silverware and murmured conversations. Waitstaff wove between tables with practiced grace, trays held high, smiles perfectly polite. But Camille Martin wasn't smiling. She was late to her shift, soaked from a sudden rain, and the new heels she'd borrowed were blistering her feet. Still, she moved with careful urgency, balancing a tray with 2 glasses of Merlot and a small birthday dessert for a high-profile guest, whose name she hadn't caught in the chaos. As she turned the corner near table 12, a sharp laugh from a patron startled her. Her foot caught the lip of the rug, and in one breathless moment, the tray tilted forward. Wine flew, dessert tumbled, and both glasses shattered onto the lap of a sharply dressed man. Gasps echoed around them as she reached toward the dark red stammer, Harry pulling out a cloth napkin, her hands trembling as she reached toward the dark red stains spreading across his crisped suit. The man didn't move. His hand gripped the table's edge, his icy blue eyes fixed on her face, not with anger, but with something colder, deeper, as if he'd seen a ghost. Camille froze under his stare, her lips parted to apologize again, but the words tangled in her throat. He said finally, voice quiet, rough around the edges. "What's your name?" She blinked. "Camille. Camille Martin. I swear, I'll pay for the cleaning." "I didn't see." But Adrian Stone didn't hear the rest. His heart was pounding too loud. Adrian Stone, founder of Stone Tech, a man Forbes once called the most untouchable mind in Silicon Valley, hadn't flinched during corporate takeovers or shareholder wars. But now, wine soaking his pants, cake on his sleeve, he sat stone still, staring at a waitress like she'd just opened a door he'd sealed years ago. Camille stepped back, confused by the intensity in his expression. "Sir?" He blinked and stood abruptly. "It's fine." The manager appeared out of nowhere, flustered and red-faced. "Mr. Stone, I am terribly sorry. She's new and—" "Camille, step back, now." But Adrian held up a hand. "Leave her." Camille stood frozen as the manager stumbled away, nodding profusely. Adrian studied her one last time, then, without a word, turned and left. Minutes later, Camille stood at the edge of the rooftop, her breath catching in her chest. What had just happened? Down on the street, the city pulsed with rain-glossed light, but inside his sleek black car, Adrian Stone sat still, Adrian Stone around the steering wheel. The driver didn't speak. He knew better. Adrian reached slowly into the glove compartment, retrieving a small leather folder he hadn't touched in years. He opened it, revealing an old photograph. Logan offered him a sedulous glance, only to It was of a young woman, smiling, wind-blown, sunlight in her hair. She looked exactly like Camille. Not similar, not just a passing resemblance, identical. He traced her face with his thumb, that familiar ache reopening like it had never healed. Her name had been Selena, and she had been gone for over a decade. He remembered the last time he saw her, running barefoot into a crowd, blood on her sleeve, a whispered warning before she vanished. No body was ever found, no real explanation, just a voicemail that said, "Don't trust them," and then silence. For years, he'd buried the grief, the guilt. Everyone told him she was dead, that he needed to move on. Tonight, a girl with her face spilled wine on him, and her name was Camille Martin. Adrian shut the folder with a snap, his jaw tightening. Coincidence? Maybe. But he didn't believe in coincidences. Not anymore. Back on the rooftop, Camille stood at the server's station, her hands still trembling. Her manager had given her a warning, and her coworkers had exchanged curious glances, but she couldn't stop thinking about that man's eyes. They weren't angry, they were shocked, haunted. She pulled her hair into a bun, trying to shake it off, but deep down, something else stirred, a strange chill that wasn't from the rain. When he asked her name, it wasn't casual, it was personal, as if he'd been searching for her. But why? Later that night, she walked the quiet streets back to her tiny apartment above a corner bookstore. She passed the same alleyways, the same murals, the same flickering lamplight, but everything felt different. Off, like she'd accidentally stepped into a life she wasn't supposed to touch. She entered her building, her clothes still slightly damp, her shoes squeaking on the wood floors. As she closed the door behind her, she paused. Something told her the man from tonight would return. And she was right. Because the next morning, when she unlocked the cafe doors for the early shift, she found something sitting on the front counter. A white envelope. No name, no note, just a business card tucked inside. She picked it up. Wolf Industries, Adrian Stone. Camille's stomach dropped. He knew where she worked, and he wanted her to know he wasn't done with her yet. Camille barely slept that night. She kept turning the business card over in her hands, as if the black ink might fade or shift, revealing some other truth. But it didn't. It stayed the same. Adrian Stone, Wolf Industries. She Googled him the moment her shift ended. His face plastered across headlines, articles, business profiles. Billionaire, innovator, reclusive, dangerous. Every word felt like a warning. And yet, he hadn't yelled. He hadn't even blinked when she ruined his suit. He had looked at her like she was a ghost. That morning, just as she was locking the cafe doors behind her, a man in a gray suit stepped forward, polished, silent, holding a cream-colored envelope. He didn't say a word, only handed it to her and walked away. Inside was a card, elegant, barely touched. "You're invited. Wolf Industries, 9th floor, Friday 10. Amelia." Moment of silence. Camille clutched it tightly, her heart racing. She didn't remember applying for any job, especially not for a man who looked at her like she'd shattered his world. At that same moment, in his sleek penthouse, Adrian stood with a tablet in hand. Security footage played in silent loops. Camille serving coffee. Camille wiping down tables. Camille laughing with coworkers. And in every frame, the resemblance was undeniable. He turned toward his assistant. "Background check," he asked. "Clean. Grew up in foster care. No known relatives. Graduated art school on scholarship. Nothing out of place, sir." "A birth certificate?" Adrian asked, already knowing the answer. The assistant shook his head. "She was found abandoned at a hospital when she was around 5. No ID, no name. She was adopted a few years later by the Martins." Adrian's jaw tightened. The age matched, the timing was too perfect, too familiar. Years ago, there had been another girl, not Camille, but Anna, a girl who once made him believe in warmth, in poetry, in love, a girl who disappeared the night his family's country house went up in flames. The police said it was an accident, but he never believed them. Anna had whispered something that night, something about running, about being followed, and then she vanished. Now here stood Camille, with her same face, her same smile, but no memory of him. Friday arrived too quickly. Camille stood outside the skyscraper's entrance, nervously adjusting her thrifted blouse. People in suits brushed past her, earbuds in, phones out, eyes forward, and yet she stood frozen, clutching the envelope. Inside the marble lobby, she hesitated before the elevator. Then, taking a breath, she stepped in. The 9th floor was silent, sleek, glass everywhere. She stepped into the meeting room where a small vase of white lilies sat, her favorite, though she'd never told anyone here. She was alone until Adrian entered. He didn't wear the same icy expression, not quite. There was something softer now, hesitant. "Thank you for coming," he said. Camille folded her arms. "You sent someone to follow me." "I needed to know who you were," he replied. She looked away. "I'm just a waitress." "Pilgrim is twisted here," Adrian said quietly. "You're someone I knew a long time ago." Camille's brow furrowed. That's not possible. He opened a drawer and took out a photo, aged, cracked at the edges. He laid it gently on the table. It was her, or at least someone who looked exactly like her, standing by a lake, holding hands with a younger Adrian. Camille stared, breath shallow. Who is that? Hannah, he whispered. The girl I loved. She disappeared after a fire, and you look just like her. Camille backed away a step, shaking her head. This has to be a mistake. I don't know her. I've never seen that picture in my life. Adrian didn't move closer. His voice stayed level, but his eyes were searching. You said you were adopted. Do you remember anything before that? She hesitated. Only pieces. I was 5 when I was found in a hospital waiting room. They said I had smoke in my lungs. My clothes were singed. I didn't speak for weeks. Adrian's throat tightened. That same night, there was a fire at my family's house. My father said it was a faulty heater, but Anna vanished. No trace. Camille's hand moved instinctively to her neck. She always wore the same silver locket. Her adoptive mother said it had been on her when they found her. She opened it. Inside was a faded hospital ID tag, half burned but still legible. Adrian reached out, slowly, gently, and read the tag. The hospital name. The date. The same night Anna disappeared. His voice cracked. That's the night of the fire. Camille's fingers trembled around the locket. You think I'm her? I don't know, Adrian whispered, but I intend to find out. She stepped back again, the weight of it crashing down. I'm not someone's second chance. I don't know who Anna was. I only know who I've tried to become. I'm not asking you to be her, he said quietly, but I think you deserve to know the truth. Camille wanted to run, but something in his tone, gentle, almost broken, made her stay. That evening, back in her small apartment, Camille pulled out the shoebox of items she'd carried since childhood. Crayon drawings, a hospital blanket, and the locket, now sitting open on her table like a question no one had ever answered. She barely noticed the envelope tucked beneath the lining, creased and yellowing with time. Inside it was a discharge summary from the hospital. In the corner, a nurse had written, "Child brought in from Stone Estate, fire. No guardian claimed custody. Transferred to Child Services." Camille stared at the words until they blurred. Stone Estate. She wasn't crazy. Back at Wolf Tower, Adrian sat alone in his office, the lights off, the city blinking far below. He held the photo in one hand and his phone in the other. He pressed a number. Begin DNA analysis, discreetly. Use the locket as the sample. And cross-reference against my family. He hung up before the assistant could ask more questions. This wasn't just a coincidence anymore. If Camille was Anna, why had she been left behind? And if she wasn't, why did the scars from his past feel like they'd cracked open all over again? He stood, walked to the shelf, and pulled down a sealed box marked with a single name. Kina. Inside was a dried flower, a ribbon, a postcard with no stamp that read, "You make me feel like I'm real." He hadn't read that card in 10 years. The next day, Camille found another envelope slipped beneath her door. This one wasn't cream or polished. It was torn and old and smelled faintly of smoke. Inside was a photo, the same one Adrian had shown her. And scribbled on the back, in a child's scrawl, "Me and Dee." Her fingers curled around it. Who was Dee? And why did her heart ache like it remembered? Camille stood in the grand lobby of the Wolf Foundation Art Gallery, stunned by the ornate walls and glittering chandeliers. She clutched the invitation she'd received, unsealed, with a crest she didn't recognize until a name was whispered, Adrian Stone. He'd offered her a job, no interview, no resume, just a card that said, "Art deserves eyes like yours." It didn't make sense. Adrian, ever the enigma, watched from the upper balcony. Camille had arrived, and she'd brought the same quiet defiance in her eyes as Anna once had. The resemblance wasn't just skin deep. It was something unspoken, like a song he'd almost forgotten the words to. "Me?" she asked, as they stood before a massive canvas in the private viewing room. Adrian didn't answer directly. "You see details others miss? You see pain, and you don't flinch." Camille was silent. Something about him unsettled her. It wasn't just the money or his power, it was how he looked at her, like he was waiting for her to remember something she never knew. Days passed, and Camille's role expanded. She curated art exhibits, met collectors, and led private showings, but the staff whispered. The headlines followed. One particular article read, "From waitress to Wolf's muse, gold digger or genius." The words cut deeper than expected. Camille slammed the paper down. "I didn't ask for any of this." She stormed toward Adrian's office, but before she could speak, he turned from the window and held up a tablet showing the article. "I've seen it," he said, voice even. "You didn't think to say anything," she snapped. "You dragged me into your world just to watch me burn in it." Adrian crossed the room slowly. "I hired you because you have something the others don't. Because the truth deserves light, and because—" He stopped himself. Camille's voice lowered. "Because I look like someone you used to love." That was the first time either of them had said it aloud. "I never told the press about you. Someone planted that story." Camille's chest tightened. "Why?" A soft knock interrupted them. One of the PR executives stepped in. "Lucia, always polished, always poised." "Adrian," she said, ignoring Camille. "Just wanted you to know, we're handling the headlines." Camille turned toward her. "You mean you leaked them?" Lucia didn't flinch. "You don't belong here." Before Camille could respond, Adrian did. "She belongs more than most of you do." Lucia paled. "Excuse me?" "Heard me," Adrian said. "She stays. End of discussion." Camille stood frozen, stunned by his defense, but also wary. She didn't want to be a pawn in someone else's game. Not again. That night, she walked the gallery alone, stopping at a painting of a young girl by a firelight, brushstrokes soft, eyes hauntingly familiar. As she leaned closer, she heard a whisper echo down the corridor. Adrian's voice, faint but clear. These might be Anna or her twin. Camille's breath caught. She wasn't supposed to hear that. Not yet. Camille didn't move for a long time. The words echoed, she might be Anna or her twin. Her fingers tightened around the gallery railing as a wave of nausea rose in her chest. Was this why he'd been so kind, so insistent she'd take the job? Was this all just a test? The next morning, she arrived early. Adrian was already there, standing in front of the same painting she'd found the night before. He didn't hear her at first. "I heard what you said," she finally spoke, voice low. "About Anna." Adrian turned slowly. "You weren't supposed to." I figured. He took a step forward, hesitant. "You have a right to know. I once loved someone who looked exactly like you. Her name was Anna. We were young, foolish, and one night there was a fire. She disappeared. They never found her." Camille folded her arms. "And now you think I'm her?" "We don't know what to think," he admitted. "But you carry her mannerisms, her expressions, even your laugh." His nephew's and Nemi's broken heart. Camille said, a touch too fast, "I was adopted when I was a baby. I never knew my real parents." Adrian nodded. "I had you investigated." Her jaw tightened. He quickly added, "Not to control you, to find answers. The timeline fits. You were found in a hospital the same night Anna vanished." Camille's fingers brushed the locket at her neck, the only thing she'd ever had from before the orphanage. Her breath caught as she opened it again. Inside, a worn hospital tag with no name, just a date and time. That night. That fire? Adrian's gaze dropped to the tag. That was the same hospital, same hour Anna went missing. Silence. Camille sank into the gallery bench, eyes glassy. "So, what are you saying? That I'm some ghost you're chasing?" He said, kneeling in front of her. "I'm saying, maybe you're the part of Anna that survived." The door creaked. Lucia stood in the shadows again, watching like a hawk. Bad time, she asked, clearly relishing the tension. Camille stood quickly. I was just leaving. Adrian rose too. Camille? But she was already walking away. Lucia's heels clicked as she approached. You're losing control. Adrian's voice was flat. She's not a pawn, and if you leak one more story, you'll be the one out. Eyes. Lucia narrowed her eyes. You think you're falling for Anna again, but what if she's not? What if she's someone else, and this whole thing breaks you? Adrian didn't answer. He simply turned toward the door Camille had just exited. Meanwhile, Camille sat on the rooftop terrace, the city skyline blurred behind her tears. She stared down at the locket again. She had never asked for this. But something inside her whispered, maybe this wasn't an accident. Maybe she was meant to find him, or be found. Her phone buzzed. One new message. From an unknown number. Stop digging into the past, or you'll both regret it. Her heart dropped. She wasn't just part of a mystery. She was in danger now. Camille stood alone on the rooftop garden, the cold night wind brushing her cheeks, as if trying to anchor her to something real. Below, the city buzzed and glittered, oblivious to the storm unraveling inside her. In her trembling hands was a weathered letter creased and faded from age, written in the slanted, almost desperate handwriting of the man she had called her father all her life. You were found alone, near the fire. I never knew where you came from, I just couldn't leave you there, the note read. Her breath caught. It had been tucked away, hidden at the bottom of a drawer beneath years of silence and carefully buried truths. She hadn't been snooping, just looking for an old phone charger, when she found the envelope. But what spilled out wasn't a spare cord or forgotten bills. It was her identity cracking apart. The fire. A single night that now unraveled every story she had ever been told. She turned as footsteps approached. Adrian? He didn't speak immediately. He simply stepped beside her, his gaze distant but grounded. His presence, once intimidating, now offered strange comfort. What? I found something too, he finally said. The report from the fire. My investigator dug it up. Camille's fingers curled tighter around the letter. You already knew? Adrian hesitated. I suspected, but I needed proof. I couldn't bring you into my grief unless I was certain you weren't just a reflection of it. He handed her a folder. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the brittle document inside. It detailed a fire from 2 decades ago. The names hit her like a cold splash of water. Elena Vega, the mother. Ana Vega and Elena Vega, twin daughters. One child confirmed deceased. The other? Camille's lips moved, but her voice barely escaped. I could be either of them. Adrian nodded. Anna was the girl I knew, but the report said the surviving child was found disoriented and unresponsive, taken to a nearby clinic, but never claimed. Somehow, someone else took you in. She pulled out the photo clip to the file. A snapshot at the twins at maybe 5 years old, both with bright eyes, tangled curls, and laughter frozen in time. She traced the image with her fingertip. I remember any of this, she whispered. You wouldn't, Adrian said gently. The trauma alone, add smoke inhalation, fear, memory loss. Camille turned away from the skyline. And now what? I just rewrite my name? Pretend I never existed before this fire? No, he said, more firmly now. You don't erase anything, you add to it. You find the truth and decide how it shapes you, not the other way around. She swallowed hard. I already sent off a DNA test. Before I found this letter. I needed to know if I was just imagining the resemblance. Adrian's expression shifted. The results should come soon. I hope they bring answers, she murmured, because right now, I don't even know if Camille is my real name. Adrian stepped closer, his voice low. Your name doesn't define who you are. Your strength does, and I see it every time you speak. Her eyes shimmered, the tears rising but still held back. But what if I'm not the girl you're hoping for? Then, you're still someone worth knowing, he replied. A long silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken understanding. of shared loss, of wounds they couldn't name but still felt deeply. "I want to help you," he added, "not because of the past, but because right now, you matter to me." Camille nodded, a small breath breaking free. Then we wait. Yet somewhere across the city, in the corner of a shadowy hotel lounge, a man in a dark suit exchanged a sealed envelope with another. The label on the flap read, "DNA results, Vega case." But the truth inside had already been rewritten. 2 days later, the envelope arrived at Camille's door. Plain, unassuming, but heavy with the weight of everything. She stared at it for a long time, fingers motionless on the paper, as if it might catch fire the moment she opened it. She thought about the letter from her adoptive father, about the charred photo Adrian had shown her, about the ache in her chest that hadn't stopped since the night he first looked at her like he'd seen a ghost. But when she opened the envelope, her heart sank. The results read, "No biological relation detected." Camille blinked. That couldn't be right. She folded the document slowly, numbness seeping through her limbs. She didn't cry, didn't scream, but something in her dimmed. A silent defeat that wrapped itself around her shoulders like a winter coat. When Adrian arrived later that evening, she was at the cafe, wiping down tables that didn't need wiping. He walked in, noticed the silence in her face before she even looked up. "They came," she said quietly. He moved closer, and she handed him the envelope. He read it, jaw tightening. Camille stepped back, searching his expression. "I guess I'm not her. Not Anna, just some girl who happens to look like someone you lost." But Adrian didn't respond right away. He looked at the letter again, frowning now. "Something's off." She shrugged. "That's the truth, it's all there." He said, sharper now. "The date. Look, it's from a different lab than the one you ordered from. This isn't the same one I recommended." Camille's heart skipped. "What are you saying?" "Thanks, Sam. Someone switched the envelope." He pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. His voice turned clipped and cold, instructing someone on the other end to trace the courier and verify the chain of custody. Camille watched him, her chest tightening again, only this time it was with something new. Not grief, not fear, hope. "Who would even do that?" she asked when he ended the call. Adrian's eyes darkened. "Anyone who has something to lose if the truth came out." She blinked. "Like your father." His silence answered for him. For years, Camille had thought her life was just small. A quiet cafe, an apartment barely big enough for her easel, a past she accepted as blank. But now, with each layer peeled back, it seemed she had been living inside someone else's silence. Someone else's decision. Adrian sat beside her on the bar stool, voice lower now. "My father never recovered from Anna's disappearance, but not because he mourned, because he covered something up. He always cared more about the company than the people in it." Camille's lips trembled. "You think he hid the truth?" "What?" Jack asked. The cafe was nearly empty, but it felt as if the air had grown thinner. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why now?" Adrian looked at her, not as Anna, not as a memory, but as Camille. As the woman standing in front of him, still holding herself together despite everything trying to break her. "Because fate has a way of circling back," he said, "and maybe it needed both of us broken to make sense again." Just then, his phone buzzed. He read the message, his brows furrowing. "We were right. The original DNA envelope was intercepted at the courier facility. The tracking stopped halfway. It was replaced." Camille's breath hitched. "So the results I read were fake?" Adrian nodded. "I'm getting another test expedited, this time under armed chain of custody." Tears spilled silently down her cheek, not from sadness, but from exhaustion, from the fight she didn't know she'd been born into. Adrian reached across the table, taking her hand. "Whatever the truth is, Camille, we face it together." She gripped his hand back. "I'm done running from questions." Outside, the wind picked up. But inside the cafe, where truths once felt unreachable, a fire had begun again. Quiet but steady. And this time, it wasn't the kind that burned things down. It was the kind that lit the way forward. The moment Adrian stepped into the study, the room felt colder, despite the afternoon sun pouring in through the tall windows of the stone estate. His father sat by the fireplace, calm as ever, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. "You're digging too deep, son," he said, without even turning to face him. "And the past doesn't like to be disturbed." Adrian tossed the forged DNA results onto the table between them. "You had these switched. Why?" His father finally turned, eyes sharp. "Because that girl brings nothing but ruin. Letting her believe she doesn't belong is the safest path. For her, and for us." "Kusane," Adrian replied through clenched teeth. "Or her twin. I deserve the truth, and she deserves more than lies." His father sighed, placing the glass down. "I paid for that fire to go away, paid the hospital to lose one girl. It was messy, tragic, but necessary." Adrian's heart pounded. "You paid to erase a child?" "To protect this family's name," his father snapped. "Your mother was fragile. The scandal, the rumors. Anna's mother was trouble. I cleaned it up." Outside, Camille clutched the envelope she'd found under the loose floorboard at the shelter where she used to volunteer. She hadn't gone there in months, but something inside her told her to return. The envelope was brittle, the handwriting soft and looping. Annelle's mother's, her name signed at the bottom of a birth certificate. Her hands shook as she stared at the words. Child, Camille Grace. Mother, Eleanor St. James. St. James, the same surname as Anna, the same hospital, the same fire. Tears stung her eyes. The world tilted. Who am I? Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. ICE report filed. Your records don't match. You're being investigated for identity fraud. She couldn't breathe. Down the street, a black car waited. She turned and ran. Back at Wolf Foundation's private office, Adrian slammed a fist into the wall. You filed that report against her, didn't you? His father remained eerily calm. A girl with no background, no papers, no verified family. She's an easy target. You'll thank me when the press backs off. Not my brother, Adrian said. You don't control me. His father said, but you're still a stone. Don't forget that. Family before fantasy? Camille packed in silence. One suitcase, her art folder, the locket. She had nowhere to go, but she couldn't stay. The last place she visited before leaving town was the small community center where she taught free art classes on weekends. A little girl tugged on her sleeve. Are you coming back, Miss Camille? Camille knelt, smiling even though her chest felt hollow. I hope so. The child gave her a folded note. A man left this for you. She opened it. It was a sketch of her, smiling, from across the cafe table. Below it, one line. Please don't run. I believe you. Camille couldn't stop the tears. But she still boarded the bus. Across town, Adrian rushed into the shelter. He had tracked her there from a tip the building manager gave one of his staff. Inside, he found the opened floorboard, the scattered papers, and the copy of the birth certificate she'd left behind in haste. He recognized the name instantly. His hands trembled as he read it again. He whispered, You are Anna's. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he spent hours reviewing hospital records, tracking Eleanor St. James's movements, even uncovering an old adoption form that had never been filed properly. Everything pointed to Camille. Everything pointed to the truth. But now she was gone, and he feared he was already too late. Camille stared out the bus windows as gray cities turned into the quiet countryside. Each mile put more distance between her and Adrian, between who she thought she was and the truth unraveling in pieces around her. The forged DNA test, the birth certificate, the words birth about Anna. Every part of her life suddenly felt borrowed. She clutched the locket in her hand, flipping it open and shut. Inside was a faded hospital ID tag, still marked with the date of the fire. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" A man across the aisle was watching her. She turned away quickly, pulling her hoodie tighter, heart hammering. Ever since the ICE message, she'd felt eyes everywhere. Whoever filed that report had power. And reach. She didn't need confirmation to know Adrian's father was behind it. Back in the city, Adrian stood on the rooftop where he first met her. The waitress with gentle hands and a voice that reminded him of a life long gone. He had failed her, not once, but twice. First with Anna, now with Camille. But this time he wasn't going to let her disappear. He dialed his lawyer. "I want the report withdrawn immediately, and I want my father investigated for evidence tampering." "He's your father, Adrian," the man warned. "This could destroy your name." Adrian's voice was steel. "If protecting Camille means burning my legacy, then light the match." At a dingy motel halfway across the state, Camille received a call from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Hello? Miss Camille Grace," the voice said. "We're contacting you regarding a scheduled immigration hearing. Please report." She hung up, panic surging. They were closing in, tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't ask for any of this." Just then, a soft knock came at the door. Camille grabbed her pepper spray. "Who is it?" Together, Alfred and Adrian's voice, "Please, open the door." She hesitated. Everything inside her screamed to run. But his voice, it didn't sound like the CEO. It sounded like the boy she once sketched from memory before she knew his name. Slowly, she opened the door. He was soaked from the rain, eyes dark but pleading. In his hand, the birth certificate she had found. "I know the truth," he said quietly, "and I know what my father did." Camille stepped back, letting him in. "Why are you here?" "Because I should have fought for you sooner, and because I'm done letting others decide who you are." She swallowed hard, staring at the paper in his hand. "You're not a mistake. You're not a fraud," Adrian said. "You're family, and I will fight to prove it, even if it means standing against my own blood." Camille broke down then, the weight of fear and shame and questions all at once. "Who am I, Adrian?" He reached for her hand. "You're Camille Grace. You're Anna's sister. You're an artist. And to me, you're everything I lost and somehow got back." The room fell silent, except for the rain against the windows. He held her as she cried. And outside, in a sleek black car parked just across the street, a figure watched them from behind tinted glass. "Other?" With a tight jaw, he whispered into his phone, "We move now." And the line went dead. The press conference was not planned. It wasn't rehearsed or managed by PR teams. It was just Adrian standing beneath the stone archway of the city museum, drenched in golden morning light, eyes rimmed with exhaustion as he faced the cameras for the first time in years. "If you see her," he said into the microphone, voice quiet but steady, "tell her I'm not asking for answers, just that she's safe. That's all I care about." The photo they used was taken at the gala. Camille smiling, holding a glass of champagne, her face half turned toward him. Adrian couldn't stop staring at it. Not because she looked perfect, but because it was the last time he saw her without fear in her eyes. After the press conference, he vanished from public view, but behind the scenes, the search ignited like wildfire. Adrian combed through every connection she'd made, old coworkers, shelters she once volunteered at, even the street artist who had painted near her first job. Nothing, not even a trace. It was as if Camille had melted into the city she once danced through. And still, Adrian kept looking. Each night, he returned to the rooftop restaurant where they first met. He stood in the corner where she spilled that glass of red wine, remembering how stunned he was, not by the stain on his shirt, but by the way her voice trembled when she apologized, and how familiar that tremble felt. Back then, he thought he was hallucinating. Now, he knew. At the penthouse, her sketchbook remained untouched on the sofa. He would sit for hours slipping through it, pausing on the drawing of the boy with the crooked smile, the girl sitting beside him with paint-splattered jeans. It wasn't just art, it was a timeline, a confession, a memory she hadn't shared out loud. On the fifth night, Adrian returned to the studio that he had built for her at Wolf Foundation. The staff had left her corner untouched. Her apron still hung from a hook. Her brushes had hardened mid-stroke. In the corner, a canvas was turned backward. He turned it around. It was a portrait of a child. Not a baby, but a toddler. Dark curls, amber eyes, and a knowing smile. Below the chin, the faint outline of a woman's hand held his. A small signature marked the corner in pencil. Anna Rivers. His fingers tightened around the edge of the easel. That name had haunted him for a decade, but now, it wasn't a ghost, it was flesh and blood. It was Camille. And he wasn't going to lose her again. Meanwhile, Camille was far from the city, tucked inside a small cabin loaned by her adoptive aunt near the mountains. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. At least, she thought so, until the local news flashed Adrian's face across the TV, and his words hit her like thunder. "You are not alone. If you can hear this, Camille, come home. Please." She clutched the edge of the couch, tears stinging her eyes. Was it home? Could she ever return to something that was built on so many lies? Camille didn't sleep that night. She walked circles around the living room, the floor creaking beneath her bare feet. In the quiet, her mind screamed. Her mother's name, that forged DNA. Adrian's father. She realized something. She had been running, not just from danger, but from the truth. And now, truth was the only thing she had left. At dawn, she packed a small bag and boarded a bus back into the city. She didn't call Adrian, didn't warn anyone. She walked straight into the lion's den, Wolf Tower. The security guards nearly stopped her, but one glimpse of her face sent them scrambling. The front desk lit up with silent alarms. But Camille didn't pause. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the executive floor. She had one mission: face Adrian's father, look him in the eye, and tell him she would not disappear. Not this time. The doors slid open with a soft chime. Camille stepped onto the executive floor of Wolf Tower, her pulse loud in her ears. It smelled of polished wood and cold air. Everything about the place screamed power. But she didn't flinch. Adrian's father was already there, waiting. Behind his desk, Gregory Wolf looked up from a glass of scotch, unbothered. He didn't stand, didn't offer a greeting. He only tilted his head, as if he'd expected her all along. He said slowly, "The runaway returns." Camille stood tall, her hands clenched at her sides. "I didn't run from you. I ran from the poison you spread, from the truth you buried." He smirked. "Truth is a matter of control, dear. And you were never supposed to resurface." "It was a child," she snapped. "You knew who I was. You let Adrian suffer. You let my mother die thinking I was gone." Gregory swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "You think Adrian's ready for the truth? That you were the girl in the fire artist twin, left behind and forgotten? That I paid to keep it quiet, to protect this company from scandal?" Camille's voice shook, but her eyes didn't waver. "He already knows, and he loves me anyway." There was a beat of silence. Gregory rose from his chair, walking slowly around the desk. "You're brave," he said, "but not smart." Just then, the elevator behind her dinged again. Footsteps, fast, familiar. Adrian burst into the office, chest heaving, eyes locking instantly onto Camille. His voice was raw with relief. "Camille!" She turned just as her knees gave out from the exhaustion, the fear, the weeks of running. But before she could hit the ground, Adrian caught her. He dropped to his knees, holding her tightly, whispering her name over and over like a prayer. "You came back," he breathed. "You came back." Gregory's lips curled into something bitter. Touching, truly. Adrian looked up, fire returning to his eyes. "I know what you did." Gregory's expression didn't change. "What exactly do you think you know, son?" "I know you forged the DNA results. I know you paid to hide Camille's identity. And I know you've been manipulating us since the day the fire happened." Camille stirred in his arms, her voice barely a whisper. He has my real birth certificate. I saw it. It has my mother's signature. Her real name." Adrian's arms tightened protectively. "It's over, Father." "No," Gregory said calmly, stepping back toward his desk. "It's only just begun. You've just told the world that Wolf Industries is built on lies." Adrian stood slowly, lifting Camille with him. "No, I've just told the world that we're strong enough to face them." With one last look, Adrian turned, carrying Camille out of the office. They took the elevator in silence. When they reached the street, Camille whispered, "I didn't mean to collapse in front of him. I wanted to be strong." Adrian looked down at her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You are strong, but even strong people fall. What matters is, you came back." She managed a faint smile. "And you were there to catch me." The world outside was chaos. Reporters, flashing lights, questions shouted through megaphones. But all Camille could see was Adrian's face, steady and warm, like the sunrise after a storm. They didn't answer questions, they didn't speak to the cameras. They simply walked away, together, into the noise, into whatever came next. But Camille knew one thing now, more than ever. She wasn't lost anymore. She had found her truth, and she had chosen to stand in it. The courtroom was silent as Camille stepped onto the witness stand. Every seat was filled, every breath held. This was the moment her entire life had been leading to, and it all came down to whether she was telling the truth about who she was. Across the aisle, Adrian watched her with a mix of fierce pride and aching concern. He knew the cost of this moment for her. She wasn't just proving her identity, she was reclaiming her life. The judge cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "State your full name, please." Camille's voice trembled at first, but steadied. "Camille Hart." And a pause. Then, "Camille Anastasia Wolf." Gasps rose from the gallery. Adrian's father stiffened at the defense table, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. "Proceed," the judge said. Camille inhaled deeply and began. She described the fire, the night that erased her life and her name, how she'd been found alone outside a hospital with burns on her shoulder and a scar above her brow. How she'd grown up with questions no one could answer, except a worn locket that bore a name and a whisper of a past. She explained how the fragments started aligning. The painting she once saw in a foster home, the nightmares that felt too real, and then meeting Adrian, how something unspoken stirred deep in her when she first saw him. It was recognition, she said quietly. It was remembering. Then came the cross-examination. The opposing attorney rose with a smug smile. "Ms. Hart, are you aware that if the court accepts your claim, you'll become a legal heir to the Wolf estate? That could mean millions." Bakes. "I didn't come for money," Camille said, holding his gaze. "I came for truth. I came for my name, my mother, my past." Adrian clenched his fists beneath the table. The next witness was unexpected. A frail, silver-haired woman entered slowly. "Mrs. Edith Davenport," she introduced herself. "I worked at the orphanage near Millstone for 30 years. I remember the girl, Anna. We always thought she was special, but someone came, paid us to file her as unidentified. We were told to forget. I didn't. I never forgot." Adrian's father shifted, clearly unsettled. The judge called a recess, but Adrian stood up. "May I speak?" The court allowed it. Adrian turned toward the judge, then the gallery, but his words were only for Camille. "I knew Anna. She changed everything in my life, and then she vanished. When I met Camille, I was shaken, but as we spent time together, I realized, piece by piece, that she hadn't just come into my life again, she'd survived." He looked directly into Camille's eyes. "I loved Anna, and I love Camille, because they're the same woman. She's not pretending, she's not manipulating, she's just trying to live the life someone else tried to erase." The judge leaned back in his chair, face solemn. "Ms. Hart, do you have further evidence to submit?" Camille stepped forward and placed her locket on the evidence table. "Inside," she said, "is a hospital ID band. It's from the night of the fire. It was found on me. And there's a letter. From my mother. She must have written it before the fire." The courtroom stilled as the judge opened it. Inside the locket, carefully preserved, was the tiny hospital tag. the name, Anastasia Wolf, and a blood type matching Camille's. The note was fragile but intact. "To my Anna," the judge read aloud, "if you're hearing this, I couldn't find you in time, but I never stopped searching." For a moment, the silence was holy. Then the judge gave a nod. "This court recognizes Camille Hart as Anastasia Wolf. Her identity is hereby confirmed." A soft collective gasp broke into applause in the back of the room. Journalists scrambled to file reports. Flashes went off, but Camille didn't see them. She saw only Adrian as he crossed the room. And in a voice low enough for only her to hear, he said, "I lost you once. I won't lose you again." Tears welled in Camille's eyes, but she blinked them back. The truth was out. The weight that had anchored her for years had finally been lifted, and it didn't collapse her. It set her free. But not everyone in the room celebrated. From the far end of the courtroom, Adrian's father rose slowly, his face a blend of rage and restraint. "This is absurd," he snapped. "She has no memory of those years. She could be anyone." The judge calmly replied, "The evidence presented, the testimonies given, and the identification markers match beyond coincidence. The ruling stands." Adrian stepped forward. "You tried to bury the truth, Father, but you forgot one thing. Truth finds a way back." The older man scoffed. "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. You're risking the company, your legacy, for a girl who showed up with a story." "She's not a story," Adrian said, his voice steady. "She's my story." The tension broke as Camille placed a gentle hand on Adrian's wrist. "He'll never understand," she whispered. "Tweet the two of them." "You don't need to," Adrian said. "You're home." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them, microphones flashing, cameras buzzing. But Adrian didn't let go of her hand. He turned to the press with a quiet command in his voice. "This is Camille Hart, or as the court now confirms, Anastasia Wolf. She is not a scandal. She is not a headline. She is family." Camille looked up at him, stunned by his calm strength. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "She's the reason this legacy exists at all," Adrian continued. "And I will protect her, as Anna, as Camille, as herself." Later that evening, away from the chaos, they sat together on the rooftop of Adrian's penthouse. The same view Anna once loved, the same skyline she dreamed under. Camille looked out over the lights and whispered, "I don't even know how to be Anna." "You don't have to," Adrian said softly. "You just have to be you. That's enough." She turned to him. "You really believe that?" "I don't believe it," he said. "I know it." For the first time in years, Camille let her body relax into his warmth, his presence, no longer uncertain, no longer clouded by suspicion or doubt. She was Anna, but she was also Camille. And somehow, Adrian had chosen both. "I keep thinking about my mother," Camille murmured. "That letter, the locket, she must have been so scared. She died thinking I was gone." Adrian nodded. "But maybe, just maybe, tonight she'd be proud." Camille exhaled, a shaky breath filled with grief and peace at once. "I hope so." "I know so," Adrian said. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in quiet and stars, the kind of silence that didn't ache but healed. At last, he turned to her and said the words that anchored them both. "I lost you once. I won't lose you again." And this time, Camille didn't look away. She whispered back, "Then let's not waste a single moment." The ruins still smelled faintly of ash, even though the charred beams had long since been cleared and replaced by smooth white walls. It was here where it all began, where the fire had once erased a name that Adrian chose to kneel. Camille stood at the edge of the courtyard, her hand resting on the iron gate. The same gate she'd passed in dreams, in fragments of childhood memory she could never place. Now it was real, restored, rebuilt, a symbol of what had burned and what had survived. Adrian waited, then turned slowly to face her. He didn't hold a ring. Instead, his hand rested gently on a wooden easel, blank canvas in place, paintbrush balanced across it. "You don't need gold to promise forever," he said softly. "But I want to build something new with you, something lasting." Her eyes stunned. "Why here?" "Because this place broke you, but it didn't destroy you. And I wanted you to choose, to stand here and decide what your story becomes now." Camille walked forward, breath unsteady, as if the earth beneath her remembered every step. She looked at the blank canvas, then up into Adrian's eyes. "I don't know who I was before the fire," she said, "but I know who I am now, and I choose to carry both." Adrian took her hands, "Then carry them with me." They didn't marry in a cathedral or wear designer gowns. It was a quiet ceremony with only the boy from the shelter, a judge, and the plaque that would soon bear her name. The boy clutched Camille's fingers, then took the brush from the easel and painted a crude heart on the canvas. Camille laughed through her tears. "Our first family portrait." Later that week, the grand opening of the Anna Camille Foundation drew hundreds. Children from shelters across the state ran freely through the houses. Art filled the rooms, some Camille's, some painted by small hands, still unsure of the world. In one hallway, a plaque gleamed beneath a beam of sunlight. "For those who were once lost, so they may always find their way home." Camille stood before it, her fingers brushing the edge. She wore a simple gold necklace now, engraved on one side with Camille and on the other with Anna, no longer either slash or L. Adrian came up beside her, offering a cup of tea from the staff kitchen. "You know, you're the reason this place breathes." She smiled. "No, the kids are. I'm just finally where I belong." He pulled her gently into his arms. "I lost you once, Anna. I watched the fire take everything, but I never stopped hoping there was something left, that someone would come back." Camille rested her head against his chest. "You waited for a ghost and found a girl with scars and questions and no perfect answers?" "I'd choose you," he whispered. "Every version, every name." Outside, the courtyard overflowed with color, chalk drawings, laughter, and dreams being rewritten. The same ground that once held ashes now held life. Inside, the blank canvas from their wedding day still hung, framed and untouched, except for that child's heart. They never finished it, because some beginnings are enough. Weeks passed, and the shelter blossomed into more than just a building. It became a beacon. Camille taught weekend art classes, her gentle voice guiding children who had also once been forgotten. Her story spread quietly, not as a scandal or headline, but as inspiration, of resilience, of second chances, of a name reclaimed with pride. One quiet afternoon, Camille sat in the corner studio with a child who refused to speak. His eyes were dark with fear, hands trembling over a sketch pad. Without pressure, Camille sat beside him and began to draw. A sunflower blooming despite storm clouds. Slowly the boy reached for a crayon. One stroke at a time, his silence gave way to color. Adrian stood in the doorway, watching them. He had seen her strength in fire, her tenderness in chaos, but in moments like this, quiet, healing, whole, he saw her legacy unfolding. After the class ended, he led her outside to the garden behind the building. A marble bench sat beneath an old willow tree, engraved with the words, "Home is not where you begin, it's where you choose to stay." Camille turned to him, touched by the tribute. "Did you do this?" Adrian nodded. "You gave me back more than Anna, you gave me peace." She traced the carving with her fingers. "I used to think I was missing pieces. Now I realize maybe I was just waiting for the right place to bring them together." He took her hand and placed a small velvet box in her palm. Inside was not a ring, but a folded piece of paper. It was the official court document that sealed her name change. Anna Camille Rivera. She stared at it, heart pounding. "You didn't have to take my name." "You didn't," Adrian replied. "You took back yours, and I just wanted to stand beside you when you did." She leaned in, kissed him softly, and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me, for never turning away." That evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched across the garden, they stood with the children before the foundation's entrance. One child lifted a small canvas and hung it above the main door. It was painted in bright, uneven strokes. A family wolf. Not by blood, but by love. Camille clutched Adrian's hand, tears in her eyes. Around them, laughter echoed. Not the forced kind, but real, rich with safety, hope, and belonging. Adrian looked over at her, his voice low and sure. "This isn't the end, you know." "No," she smiled. "It's just the brushstroke I never thought I'd get to finish." Their past had been fire. Their present was light. And their future, painted in love, carved in legacy, was finally home.